Welcome back to the channel, where we dive into the shadows of the human mind. Tonight's episode is different. These aren't just stories, they're accounts that have shattered lives, experiences so unnerving that some people couldn't even finish reading them. We're talking about real horror that lingers long after the words fade. If you're easily unsettled, now's the time to click away. But if you stay, remember, some doors are better left closed. I've lived in Millbrook Apartments for 8 years now, ever since Mom got the job at the psychiatric hospital across town. It's just not much to look at, a cluster of brick buildings arranged in a horseshoe around a central courtyard, with peeling paint and windows that rattle when trucks pass by on Highway 9. But it's home, and more importantly, it's where my little brother Danny learned to breathe again. Danny was born with severe asthma, the kind that kept us in emergency rooms more nights than I care to count, watching his tiny chest struggle for each breath while machines beeped their urgent warnings. When we moved here, something changed. The attack stopped. His inhaler gathered dust on the nightstand. The doctors called it miraculous. I called it the reason we'd never leave. Because Millbrook has rules. Every night at exactly 12:47 a.m. you'll hear them if you're listening. Voices, soft and sweet, drifting through the courtyard like smoke. A choir of children singing lullabies in languages I've never heard before. The melody is hauntingly beautiful, something that makes your chest ache with longing for a childhood you can't quite remember. But you must never, ever look. Mrs. Chen from the resident council explained it to us our first week. She arrived with homemade dumplings, a basket of household supplies, and a manila envelope thick with newspaper clippings. The stories inside were enough to make anyone take notice: freak accidents, unexplained deaths, families destroyed by runs of impossible bad luck, all connected to residents who tried to see the source of the midnight singing. "The voices protect this place," Mrs. Chun had whispered, glancing nervously at Danny as he played with his toy cars. "They keep the sickness away, bring good fortune. But they demand respect. Never look through your window when they sing. Never open your door. Never investigate." Mom had installed blackout curtains on every window that very night, the kind with Velcro strips that sealed completely against the frame. She bought white noise machines for each room, claiming they'd help us sleep better. But I knew the truth. She was trying to muffle the voices to make it easier to resist their call. For years, the system worked perfectly. Danny grew stronger, healthier than he'd ever been. Mom got promotion after promotion at the hospital. I aced my SATs and got into my dream college. Even our neighbors seemed touched by an unusual streak of good luck. Lottery wins, job offers, miracle recoveries from illnesses. But luck has a way of changing when you break the rules. It started 3 months ago when the Hendersons moved into 3B, the apartment directly below us. They had a daughter about my age named Sarah, pretty, confident, and possessed of that particular brand of teenage recklessness that made my stomach clench with worry. She reminded me too much of myself at 16, back when I thought I was invincible. The resident council gave them the standard welcome package. I watched from our balcony as Mrs. Chun delivered the dumplings, the supplies, and most importantly, the envelope. I saw Mr. Henderson's face change as he flipped through the clippings. I saw Mrs. Henderson's hands shake as she read. I saw Sarah roll her eyes and disappear into her room. That should have been my first warning. Sarah and I became friends quickly. She was funny, sharp-witted, and bored out of her mind in what she called this creepy complex full of weirdos. We'd hang out after school, doing homework in the courtyard or walking to the gas station for Slurpees. She seemed normal, too normal for someone who'd been given the same warnings we all received. "Do you actually believe that stuff?" she asked me one afternoon as we sat on the swings in the small playground. "About the singing kids?" I chose my words carefully. "I believe in being careful. It's probably just someone's stereo system on a timer," she said, kicking at the gravel. "Or maybe the building has some kind of acoustic thing that makes the wind sound weird." "Maybe," I replied, but my skin prickled with unease. The first time she asked to sleep over, I should have said no. But Sarah was persistent, and I was lonely. Most of my old friends had moved away or grown distant. Mom agreed, probably hoping I'd finally found a normal teenage friendship. We set up air mattresses in the living room and stayed up late watching horror movies on my laptop, sharing popcorn and laughing at the cheesy special effects. Sarah seemed relaxed, happy even. I started to think maybe she'd taken the warnings more seriously than she'd let on. Then 12:47 came around. The voices started soft, as they always did, a gentle humming that seemed to rise from the very foundations of the building. Gradually, words emerged, syllables in languages that predated any dictionary. The melody was heartbreakingly sweet, the kind of lullaby a mother might sing to calm a crying child. Sarah sat up immediately, her eyes bright with curiosity. "There it is. Just ignore it," I whispered, reaching for the white noise machine. "It'll stop in exactly 13 minutes." But Sarah was already moving, crawling toward the window with deliberate purpose. "I just want to see where it's coming from." "Sarah, no." I grabbed her arm, but she shook me off with surprising strength. "Don't be such a baby," she hissed. "It's probably just some kids playing a prank." She reached for the corner of the blackout curtain, and my blood turned to ice water. "Sarah, please." "You don't understand what you're doing." "I understand perfectly." Her fingers found the Velcro strip. "I'm tired of being afraid of shadows." The singing grew louder, more insistent, as if it knew what was happening. Individual voices became distinct. A soprano with the clarity of breaking glass, an alto rich as honey, a dozen others weaving in and out of harmony. It was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard, and it filled me with absolute terror. "Sarah, stop!" But it was too late. She peeled back the curtain and pressed her face against the glass. The singing stopped instantly. Sarah went rigid, her breath fogging the window in rapid puffs. I couldn't see her face, but I could hear a strange whimpering sound coming from her throat. "Sarah?" I whispered. She didn't respond. She just stood there, motionless, staring out into the courtyard at something I couldn't see and prayed I never would. Then she started screaming. It wasn't a normal scream. It was the sound of something fundamental breaking inside a person, like the snap of a bone under too much pressure. Sarah collapsed backward, convulsing on the floor. Her eyes rolled back so far I could only see the whites. Mom burst out of her room, took one look at the open curtain and Sarah's condition, and immediately snapped the blackout panel back into place. But the damage was done. Sarah's convulsions stopped, but when she finally sat up, I knew something was wrong. Her face was pale as paper, her lips had gone blue, and her eyes looked like they belonged to someone much older, someone who'd seen too much. "What did you see?" Mom asked gently, kneeling beside her. Sarah opened her mouth to speak, but only managed a dry croak. When she tried again, her voice came out in a whisper, so quiet we had to lean in to hear her. "They were children," she said, "but they were so old, so very old. And they were looking right at me." The knocking started 5 minutes later. Soft at first, a gentle tap 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 on the sliding door that led to our balcony. Then it spread to the windows, the walls, even the ceiling above us. It wasn't random. There was a pattern to it, a rhythm that matched the melody we'd heard earlier. But worst of all were the voices that accompanied it. "Sarah," they called in perfect unison, their words muffled by glass and brick, but still crystal clear. "Sarah, come out and play." Sarah began to sob. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." I didn't mean to look. "Come out, Sarah. We've been waiting for you." The knocking grew louder, more insistent. I could hear similar sounds echoing from the apartment below us, the Hendersons' place. Sarah's parents must have been going through their own nightmare. "We know you can hear us, Sarah. We know you can see us now." Mom grabbed the phone to call 911, but the moment she started dialing, the voices changed. "911," they sang in perfect mimicry of Mom's voice. "Emergency services, 911." She hung up immediately, her hands shaking. The knocking continued until sunrise, exactly as long as the singing usually lasted, 13 minutes that felt like 13 hours. When it finally stopped, Sarah was a hollow shell of the girl I'd known. Her parents came to collect her an hour later, and I'll never forget the look in their eyes. It was the same expression I'd seen on Sarah's face, ancient, haunted, broken. The Hendersons moved out 2 days later. I haven't seen Sarah since, but I've heard rumors. Stories from mutual friends about how she can't sleep anymore, how she jumps at every shadow, how her family has been plagued by an impossible string of bad luck. Her father lost his job. Her mother was diagnosed with early-onset dementia. Sarah herself dropped out of school and spent 3 months in a psychiatric facility. They say she still talks about the children in the courtyard, about how they're waiting for her to come back. They say she draws pictures of them sometimes. Dozens of children with ancient eyes and voices like broken music, standing in circles around our building, singing their eternal lullabies. But here's what nobody else knows, what I've never told anyone. Last week, I was walking through the courtyard in broad daylight when I noticed something carved into the bark of the old oak tree at its center. Fresh cuts in the wood, still weeping sap. Names. Dozens of them. Scratched deep into the trunk in a spiral pattern that made my eyes water to follow. Some were old enough that the bark had grown over them, making them barely legible. Others looked recent. And there, near the bottom of the spiral, carved in shaky letters that could have been made by a child's hand, I saw something that made my blood freeze. Danny, age 7, couldn't breathe, but now he can my little brother's name. His age when we moved here. His condition, the one that mysteriously disappeared the moment we became residents of Millbrook Apartments. I ran home and found Danny in his room, playing video games and humming softly to himself. He looked up when I entered, and for just a moment, just a split second, his eyes looked different, older, ancient. Then, he smiled his normal 8-year-old smile and asked if I wanted to play. "Sure," I said, my voice barely steady. "I'd love to." But as I sat down beside him, I couldn't stop thinking about that tree, about all those names carved into its bark, about the price of miracles. And I couldn't stop wondering, when my time comes to move out, to go to college, to leave this place behind, will Danny come with me? Or will his name stay carved in that tree forever, adding his voice to the midnight choir that keeps the rest of us safe? I still hear them singing every night at 12:47. But now, sometimes I think I can pick out one voice among the rest, higher than the others, newer, with just a hint of the wheeze that used to make him struggle for breath. The blackout curtains remain sealed. They always will. Some prices are too terrible to pay, but once you've paid them, backing out isn't an option. The choir is always looking for new voices, after all. And they sing so beautifully in the dark. It was 2 a.m. I was home alone. My parents were away for the weekend, and my brother and his friend had come to pick me up for a party. They were going to drive me around in my dad's really nice Audi, just the two of them and me in the back seat. I wasn't allowed to drink, so they parked around the corner and snuck me in through the back door. As soon as I got to the kitchen, I heard a crash in my backyard, and I froze. When I turned to tell my brother about it, he was already gone. I called out to him, "Hey, what was that?" But he didn't answer. Instead, he just kept loading up shot glasses with soda water and ice and handing them to me, making sure I took one every 5 minutes or so. And then he kept telling me, "Drink, drink, drink." It was weird. I looked out the window next to me and saw a cop car slowly driving past our house. I don't know why, but I started getting really scared. There was no way my parents would be home for another 4 hours, and I was alone in the house with only my brother, who seemed to have completely forgotten that I was even there. My brother's friend was still outside in the backyard talking on his phone. As I watched, he walked past the window my face was pressed up against, and I saw that he was holding a crow skull. At this point, I was getting freaked out, but I tried to convince myself that it was probably just some Halloween decoration. Maybe my brother and his friend had come up with some elaborate prank, and I was just not understanding it. I needed more convincing, though, because as I watched, the guy came inside, holding the crow skull like it was a bloody meat cleaver. And then he started cleaning it with a cloth. Then he looked directly at me and gave me a big smile. That's when I knew something was very wrong. My brother and his friend both looked at me and started laughing. The friend said, "You want to see something funny? Come check this out." He picked up the crow skull again and was about to leave when my brother stopped him. "No, you guys, you're going to freak her out. Let's go check on the grill." I was still worried that they were just trying to get me drunk, but I followed them out the back door into the backyard. We were having a barbecue the night before, and my brother must have left the grill on. Now it was glowing red hot in the middle of the night. But that wasn't what caught my attention. It was the fact that surrounding the grill were all these weird symbols and pentagrams drawn in the dirt. And right in the middle of the pentagram was a bunch of dead flowers and leaves and a bloodied meat cleaver. A real bloodied meat cleaver. My brother and his friends started chanting in Latin, and I was terrified. I remember throwing up on the grass. It was the only thing I could do. I don't remember if I screamed or if they made me shut up, but at some point I blacked out. When I woke up, I was lying on my bedroom floor, and it was light outside. I got up and went to the bathroom and threw up again. Then I noticed blood all over my arms. I must have cut myself when I was throwing up on the grass. As I looked around my mouth, I noticed blood in my teeth. Then I spit it out. On the floor, it was a piece of flesh. The panic started rising in my chest. What had they done to me? Had they drugged me? Was that why I couldn't remember anything? That's when I heard the front door open. My parents were home. I ran down the stairs and threw myself on my mom. I don't remember exactly what I said. All I remember is that I was shaking and crying, and then my parents called the police. They searched the house and found nothing. I told them about the symbols in the backyard, but by the time the forensics team got there, the rain had washed them all away. Nothing unusual was ever found. No signs of a struggle, no fingerprints, nothing. To this day, I have no idea what that cult wanted from me or what they did to me while I was unconscious. My brother and his friend both stopped answering my calls after that night. I haven't seen either one of them since. I know people are going to say I'm crazy, but I never told anyone this story until now because I was too ashamed. I felt like I should have known better than to trust my brother, but I didn't, and I think that's the part that hurts the most. Thanks for listening, friends. I'll see you next time. My son had been sick for days, and I'd spent the night before just watching him sleep, waiting for him to get up, go to the bathroom, and fall back asleep. I was a single mom, and I had to be up early to take him to the hospital again for more tests. So I finally got the chance to shower, change out of my sweatpants, and eat dinner while watching TV. My son's room was right across from the living room, and the window from his room was directly reflecting on the TV screen. As I sat eating, I could see the reflection of the window and what appeared to be a man standing outside looking in. I continued eating, half watching the TV and half paying attention to the reflection. The man was still standing there. I stopped eating and stared at the reflection. Was someone outside watching me? I stood up, walked over to the window, and looked out into the backyard. Nothing. I walked back to the couch and continued watching TV, telling myself it was just a trick of the light. About an hour later, I heard a small voice behind me say, "Mommy, why was there a man in my room?" I froze. I turned around and saw my son standing in the hallway in his underwear, rubbing his eyes. "What are you doing up, honey?" I asked, relieved that it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. He yawned and said, "One, I had a bad dream and came to get a drink of water." "Where were you?" "I was in the other room." "Why don't you go back to bed?" "Okay," he said, walking away. A few minutes later, I heard a crash from his room, followed by him calling out, "Mommy, come quick." I rushed into his room to see what had happened and found him standing next to his overturned bed, his eyes wide with fear. "Mommy, there was a man in my closet, and he scared me when I went to get up. I felt a chill run down my spine." "Oh, honey, I'm sure it was just a dream. Let's get you back in bed." I tucked him in, but he started crying, and I ended up staying in bed with him until he fell back asleep. Now, normally, I wouldn't think anything of it, except this has happened 3 times in the past 2 months. Every time it's the same thing. He tells me he saw a man in his room, and then we find nothing. I can't help but wonder if anyone else has seen this man or if I am going crazy. We moved here only 6 months ago, and I've never seen a man around our yard. Also, this neighborhood is very nice, and all the houses are spaced far apart. You can't even see your neighbor's house from ours? This man must be huge. I have no idea how I missed him. So yeah, I think we're gonna move. Yeah, up. Maybe you should move, especially because you're keeps. Seeing this guy, and especially because last time I checked, kids aren't really allowed to have their own closet. They usually share with their parents. Yeah, that is not normal. That is not okay. No, just because your kid is little doesn't mean that he needs to share a closet with you. That's creepy. And also, just for the record, I'm not going crazy. My husband and I do not share a closet, but thank you for your input. So then Api says, this man must be huge. I have no idea how I missed him. Well, how big is this man? Let's see if we can figure it out. So Op's son is 4 feet tall, which is 122 centimeters. Now this story takes place in the United States. So we know that Opea's son is between 48 to 52 inches, or between 122 to 132 centimeters tall. So let's just say that he's exactly 50 inches or 127 centimeters tall. And let's say that the top of his eye level is exactly at the top of the window. So how tall would the man need to be in order for the reflection to reach the top of the window? Well, according to my totally legitimate math skills, the man would need to be approximately 7 feet 3 inches tall. Yeah, that doesn't seem likely.